In the quiet hours before dawn, when the world holds its breath at the threshold between darkness and light, there exists a moment of perfect elemental balance. Earth lies in steadfast silence beneath a sky where fire's stars are fading. Air stirs with the first whispers of morning breeze, while water's dew adorns every surface with glistening possibility. You have picked up this book because something within you recognizes that the path to well-being is not found in maximizing a single quality, be it practical stability, passionate drive, intellectual clarity, or emotional depth, but in cultivating the right balance of these essential energies. Or perhaps you're drawn to these pages because you sense that our modern world, with its fragmented approach to human experience, has lost touch with an ancient understanding that we are not a collection of isolated psychological parts, but integrated beings whose thoughts, emotions, sensations, and energies form an interconnected whole. In an age that often treats the mind, heart, body, and spirit as separate domains requiring different specialists, the elemental paradigm offers a refreshingly holistic alternative, a framework that honors the complexity of human experience while providing practical pathways to integration. Whatever brings you to this exploration, you stand at the beginning of a journey both ancient and immediate, both universal and uniquely yours. The elements, earth, fire, air, and water, await as your guides, offering their distinctive wisdom as you navigate the terrain of your inner landscape toward greater balance, authenticity, and wholeness. The elemental paradigm is not merely one conceptual framework among many, but perhaps the most enduring psychological model in human history. From the pre-Socratic philosophers of ancient Greece to the indigenous wisdom traditions spanning continents, from medieval alchemical texts to contemporary therapeutic modalities, these four primal forces have consistently emerged as fundamental organizing principles for understanding both the cosmos and the human psyche. This remarkable cross-cultural and cross-temporal resonance speaks to something profound, that the elements represent archetypal patterns embedded in human perception, transcending specific belief systems and cultural contexts. Imagine standing at the center of a vast circle with the four elements positioned around you like cardinal directions on a compass. From the north, Earth extends its gifts of stability, embodiment, and practical wisdom. The element of substance and form, Earth invites you into grounded presence, sensory awareness, and patient manifestation. Through Earth, you learn to create the stable foundations and sustainable structures that support all other aspects of your being. Without sufficient Earth, life becomes unrooted, impractical, and disconnected from physical reality. From the south, fire radiates its gifts of passion, transformation, and creative power, the element of energy and catalysis. Fire invites you into purposeful action, courageous self-expression, and visionary becoming. Through fire, you learn to overcome inertia, channel your life force toward meaningful goals, and transform challenges into opportunities for growth. Without sufficient fire, life becomes stagnant, uninspired, and lacking in direction. From the east, air offers its gifts of clarity, communication, and connective understanding. The element of thought and relationship, air invites you into intellectual exploration, articulate expression, and perspective-taking that transcends limited viewpoints. Through air, you learn to analyze complex situations, communicate across differences, and perceive patterns that link seemingly separate domains. Without sufficient air, life becomes confused, inarticulate, and trapped in narrow perspective. From the west, water extends its gifts of emotional depth, intuitive wisdom, and fluid adaptability. The element of feeling and unconscious knowing, water invites you into empathic connection, authentic vulnerability, and responsive flow with life's ever-changing currents. Through water, you learn to access and express the full spectrum of human emotion, to trust the wisdom that emerges from beyond rational thought, and to heal psychological wounds through compassionate attention. These four elemental energies exist not as separate categories but as dynamic forces in constant interaction, sometimes harmonizing, sometimes competing, sometimes transforming one another through their contact. Like instruments in a symphony, they create the complex music of your psychological life through their ever-shifting relationship. No single element is inherently superior to the others. Each offers essential qualities that become problematic only when excessive or deficient relative to the whole. The elemental paradigm invites you to become the conductor of this inner orchestra, developing awareness of which instruments are playing too loudly or too softly at any given moment, and learning the art of adjusting their relative volumes to create the particular harmony that your unique nature and circumstances require. While the language of elements may seem archaic to contemporary ears, its psychological insights find remarkable validation in modern research and therapeutic practice. The ancient wisdom embedded in elemental thinking anticipated many of the discoveries that neuroscience, psychological theory, and clinical practice have only recently articulated in scientific terms. Similarly, contemporary personality psychology's most empirically validated model, the five-factor or Big Five framework, reveals elemental patterns. Modern therapeutic approaches likewise echo elemental wisdom, often without explicit acknowledgement. Cognitive behavioral therapy works primarily with the air element. Somatic approaches channel earth wisdom. Emotion-focused therapies engage with water, and motivational interviewing activates fire energy. What makes the elemental paradigm so valuable in our contemporary context is precisely its integrative nature. Rather than fragmenting human experience, the elemental model recognizes these as interconnected aspects of a unified whole. The elemental paradigm transforms from ancient cosmology to practical psychology through its recognition that these primal forces exist not just in the external world, but within the landscape of your own being. Let us explore each element more deeply as a psychological archetype, a fundamental pattern of energy that manifests through your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and relationships. These archetypes are not rigid categories into which you must fit yourself, but fluid qualities that exist in varying proportions within every human being. Earth represents the material dimension of human experience. Your physical body, sensory perceptions, relationship with the tangible world, and capacity for practical manifestation. Earth expresses itself through your capacity for embodied presence, the ability to be fully aware of and at home in your physical being. When you feel the solid ground beneath your feet, the weight and boundaries of your body, the subtle signals of hunger or fatigue, you are experiencing Earth consciousness. Earth also manifests as your relationship with structure and form, the capacity to create and maintain the systems, routines, and boundaries that support sustainable functioning. When you establish daily rhythms that honor your physical needs, organize your environment to support your activities, or set clear limits that protect your resources, you are expressing Earth wisdom. In your approach to challenges, Earth appears as practical problem-solving and steady persistence. Rather than being overwhelmed by obstacles or expecting immediate transformation, Earth energy breaks challenges into manageable steps and addresses them with patient, incremental action. In relationships, Earth expresses as reliability, consistency, and tangible care. Earth-strong individuals may show love more through practical support and steadfast presence than through verbal expression or emotional intensity. They create safety through their dependability and attention to concrete needs, building trust through actions that match their words. The shadow expressions of Earth emerge when this element becomes excessive or deficient relative to the whole. Too much Earth can manifest as rigidity, materialism, or resistance to change, like soil that has become hard-packed and unyielding. Too little Earth appears as impracticality, difficulty with follow-through, or disconnection from physical reality, like seeds scattered on shallow ground that cannot take root. Developing healthy Earth involves cultivating embodied awareness, creating supportive structures without becoming imprisoned by them, and balancing practical concern for material needs with openness to growth and change. This element invites you to honor your incarnate nature, to recognize that you are not merely a consciousness inhabiting a body, but an embodied being whose physical existence provides both wisdom and necessary limitations for your journey. Fire represents the energetic dimension of human experience, your passion, drive, creative inspiration, and capacity for transformative action. As a psychological archetype, fire governs your sense of purpose, agency, and vitality. Fire expresses itself through your capacity for desire, the ability to want something with sufficient intensity to overcome inertia and resistance. When you feel the pull of inspiration, the excitement of possibility, the drive to create or achieve, you are experiencing fire consciousness. Fire also manifests as your relationship with change and becoming, the capacity to envision possibilities beyond current limitations and catalyze transformation in yourself and your circumstances. When you challenge yourself to grow beyond comfortable patterns, take risks in service of meaningful goals, or reinvent aspects of your life that no longer serve your evolution, you are expressing fire wisdom. In your approach to challenges, fire appears as courage, initiative, and creative problem-solving. Rather than avoiding difficulties or waiting for someone else to act, fire energy steps forward with confidence to address obstacles through bold action and innovative thinking. In relationships, fire expresses as inspiration, healthy challenge, and authentic self-expression. Fire-strong individuals often catalyze growth in others through their contagious enthusiasm and willingness to speak truth even when it creates temporary discomfort. The shadow expressions of fire emerge when this element becomes excessive or deficient relative to the whole. Too much fire can manifest as aggression, impulsivity, or burnout, like a wildfire that consumes everything in its path without sustainable purpose. Too little fire appears as apathy, chronic procrastination, or suppressed anger, like embers struggling to ignite, lacking the critical mass needed for transformation. Developing healthy fire involves cultivating connection with authentic desire, channeling passionate energy toward meaningful goals, and balancing assertive action with receptive awareness of timing and context. This element invites you to honor your capacity for creative transformation, to recognize that you are not merely a passive recipient of circumstances, but an active participant in your own becoming. AIR, the breath of connection. Air represents the mental dimension of human experience, your thoughts, communication, social connections, and capacity for understanding complex systems. As a psychological archetype, air governs your intellectual clarity, expressive ability, and social intelligence. Air also manifests as your relationship with language and communication, the capacity to translate inner experience into forms that can be shared with others. When you find words that capture subtle nuances of thought or feeling, adapt your expression to be understood by different audiences, or listen with genuine curiosity to perspectives different from your own, you are expressing air wisdom. In your approach to challenges, air appears as perspective-taking, mental flexibility, and systemic understanding. Rather than becoming fixated on immediate obstacles or limited viewpoints, air energy steps back to see broader contexts and consider multiple angles. In relationships, air expresses as dialogue, intellectual connection, and the capacity to navigate differences through understanding rather than control. Air-strong individuals often excel at creating shared understanding through skillful communication, finding common ground without requiring identical perspectives. The shadow expressions of air emerge when this element becomes excessive or deficient relative to the whole. Too much air can manifest as overthinking, excessive talking or emotional detachment, like a windstorm that uproots rather than refreshes. Developing healthy air involves cultivating clear thinking without becoming lost in abstraction, communicating with precision without overwhelming others with words, and maintaining intellectual flexibility without sacrificing depth of understanding. This element invites you to honor your capacity for conceptual understanding and connection, to recognize that you are not an isolated consciousness, but a participant in vast networks of relationship and meaning. Water represents the emotional dimension of human experience, your feelings, intuitions, unconscious patterns, and capacity for empathic connection. Water expresses itself through your capacity for feeling, the ability to experience and navigate the full spectrum of human emotions. Water also manifests as your relationship with the unconscious, the capacity to access knowing that emerges from beyond rational thought. In your approach to challenges, water appears as adaptability, emotional resilience, and holistic perception. In relationships, water expresses as empathy, emotional attunement, and depth of connection. The shadow expressions of water emerge when this element becomes excessive or deficient relative to the whole. Developing healthy water involves cultivating emotional awareness without being controlled by feelings, accessing intuitive wisdom without dismissing rational understanding, and maintaining empathic connection without losing appropriate boundaries. This element invites you to honor your emotional nature, to recognize that feelings are not irrational disruptions, but an essential form of intelligence that connects you with yourself, others, and the deeper currents of life. When you allow yourself to feel joy without clinging, or sorrow without drowning, to recognize subtle emotional signals before they become overwhelming, you are experiencing water consciousness. When you trust a gut feeling that precedes logical analysis, receive creative inspiration that arrives whole, rather than being constructed piece by piece, you are expressing water wisdom. Rather than forcing situations into predetermined forms or becoming rigid in the face of change, water energy flows around obstacles, finding creative pathways forward that respect the actual contours of circumstances. Water-strong individuals often excel at creating spaces where others feel seen and understood, offering a quality of presence that allows authentic sharing. This emotional intelligence provides essential guidance for decision-making and relationship building, allowing you to respond appropriately to the lived reality of situations, rather than merely their abstract dimensions. This fluid quality recognizes that effectiveness often comes not from imposing will, but from discerning and working with the inherent patterns of situations. The art of elemental living lies not in maximizing any single element, but in developing the right balance and relationship among all four for your unique constitution and circumstances. Like an ecosystem that thrives through diversity and interconnection, your psychological well-being depends on the harmonious interaction of earth, fire, air, and water, each contributing its essential qualities in appropriate proportion. This elemental balance is not a static state, but a dynamic equilibrium that shifts in response to changing needs and circumstances. Different situations call for different elemental emphases. A crisis might require Earth's stability and practical action. A major life transition might need fire's courage and transformative power. A complex decision might call for air's analytical clarity and perspective. A relationship challenge might demand water's emotional intelligence and empathic understanding. The wisdom lies in developing sufficient awareness to recognize which element is needed in any given circumstance, and sufficient flexibility to adjust your elemental proportions accordingly. Elemental imbalance manifests when certain elements dominate while others are suppressed or underdeveloped, creating distinctive patterns of limitation and suffering. Earth fire. Imbalance creates issues related to manifestation and change. When Earth dominates without sufficient fire, you may experience stagnation. When fire dominates without adequate earth, you may experience burnout. Air-water imbalance creates issues related to thinking and feeling. When air dominates without sufficient water, you may experience overthinking. When water dominates without adequate air, you may experience emotional flooding. Earth-air imbalance creates issues related to theory and practice. When earth dominates without sufficient air, you may experience narrow pragmatism. When air dominates without adequate earth, you may experience impractical idealism. Fire-water imbalance creates issues related to action and receptivity. When fire dominates without sufficient water, you may experience forceful control. When water dominates without adequate fire, you may experience passive drifting. These imbalances manifest not only within individuals, but in relationships, organizations, and cultures as well. An organization that values fire and air while neglecting earth and water might drive impressive short-term results while creating conditions for long-term dysfunction. The path toward elemental balance involves both appreciation for your natural strengths and conscious development of underrepresented elements. This developmental work doesn't mean suppressing your authentic nature, but expanding it to include a fuller spectrum of human capacities. Like a musician who already excels at one instrument learning to play others, you're not abandoning your primary strength, but complementing it with new capabilities that allow for richer, more complex expression. The elements themselves teach us this wisdom. Earth reminds us that growth takes time and consistent effort. Fire shows us that transformation often requires releasing what no longer serves us. Air demonstrates can completely change our experience. And water reveals that flowing with, rather than against life's currents, creates the path of least resistance. As you turn these pages, both intellectual curiosity and embodied presence, allowing yourself to notice which concepts resonate deeply and which exercises create resistance or flow. These responses themselves provide valuable mental balance and the areas calling for attention and development. The ancients believed that understanding the elements was the key to understanding both the cosmos and the human soul. In keeping with that wisdom, your journey of elemental balancing as part of a larger harmony. A contribution not only to your own well-being, but to the healing of our collective relationship with ourselves, each other, and the living world that sustains us. For as we find greater balance within, we naturally contribute to greater balance without, becoming agents of integration in a world desperate for wholeness. Let us begin. 1. What drew you to this elemental framework? 2. Which element do you intuitively feel most connected to, and why? 3. Where in your life do you feel most balanced/imbalanced?